you know? So, like any complex person, there were parts of John that were great and parts of John that were different than that, right? Because, so John could be really stubborn, right? And so that would arise sometimes, and he was often confident of his views. So sometimes some working out was required, but it was actually fun because there were a couple of things. John was, he was never manipulative. Now, I am guilty of manipulating him because we'd go running and I would think I want to run just a little bit faster. So I would bring up an old race director who used to be in town, and John would then, over the next few minutes he started talking about it, pick up his pace by 10 or 15 seconds a mile as he got more and more worked out. But it was great because it was for me, it was just like, John, what do you think about zip? You know, but he himself, I never, ever saw him being manipulative at all, which is really, that is a cool thing, right? He could express really energetic annoyance at things, but then he could just drop it. You know, one time we were going out to run and I was driving to the starting point and he was convinced I was wrong and he was really on my case. And then we got there and I was like, oh, okay, let's go run. And I really admired that, his ability to just release it. It didn't matter to him. So one more story about being practical. This is actually kind of nice. When Callie was pregnant with Bob, they were living at a place called Arroyo Quemada, which is a really tiny little settlement. And in fact then, now it's more upscale, but back then it was a really tiny little settlement on the beach, sort of to the west of where the Bacara is now. I mean, it was like nowhere. That was in the days when you drive into town, you stop at that beautiful tiled gas station, you get some gas, you write down how much gas you got, and then you keep going, and at the end of the month, the owner would send you a bill. It was a while ago, right? And so there was no phone, because they didn't have phone service. And Callie said, we have to have phone, and you know, John was kind of proud of this. He just sort of, from work, general research at the time was in a sort of set of rooms above a bowling alley. So, you know, if you're a researcher, rooms above a bowling alley are like absolutely the ideal circumstance. You can't do better than that. But he just got on the phone and called various representatives, and 3 days later he had a phone line. And to me, that kind of practicality, you know, so some of the stories we've been hearing emphasize the practicality of implementation more than maybe the practicality of the choice of what activity to engage in. But you know, I really admired it. John was classless from my point of view, and that does not mean not classy. It means amongst the people I've known, I can't think of anybody who was less interested in social class, less interested in position, less interested in prestige. You know, it was sort of everyone gets to be whoever they are. And, you know, this is in the mid-'80s, before it was stylish. We had a conversation about homosexuality. You know, at general research, we had this big locker room and a bunch of showers where we'd all stand together and shower. And, you know, the idea that there were gay men showering with us, you know, I was a little bit teasing, and John was just like, he didn't care in the slightest. You know, it's very consistent with what Des said about bringing women into running. It just didn't seem to him that if people were people, so fine, you know, and that kind of directness, you know, something that, you know, how people live on with us is how they influence us, and I was just like, yeah, that's the right way to do it. That's how to do it. And then, you know, maybe a thing that really stuck with me is John was always looking to whatever was next. You know, he was not like, you know, I'm awesome. He wasn't looking things at the past. It was like, what's the next thing we're doing? Even as he began to lose his mental acuity, he was still about the next marathon he was going to run. And you know, even though he wasn't going to, that was still it was still the right attitude to have. It was great. Okay, so that poem had general research. So we did do a lot of deeply classified stuff. John did some of that. He had these truly awesome pants in the mid '80s that were sort of yellow and green. The Kornell, I've never seen them. Okay, well they were anyway, they were awesome. They were awesome. They were so appropriate for a highly classified environment where we had government representatives coming to talk about all this stuff. but John was just like, yeah, these are pants. You wear pants to work, right? Well, these are pants, right? And oh, indeed, is that good? No, very nice, very nice. The Citroen wagon, we've already talked about that, which was awesome. So the whole thing about the engineering is the guy who founded Citroen, John, as you know, liked to mess with stuff. The guy who founded Citroen was like a maniac engineer, but he was not a marketer. He was not a manufacturing genius. So whenever he thought of a new way to do something that he thought would be more cool, he just did it, right? Which meant that if you're going to fix a Citroen, it wasn't like, oh yeah, this is the 54 to 57 model year. It was more like, this was a 55, but it was before March when they changed that thing. So John would take these trips down to LA because some guy who must have been totally loved by his neighbors had a yard full of dead Citroens, and he would go scavenge and find the part he needed, and then he was good. That was the Citroen thermometer butt. Okay, so another thing I admire about John is this kind of radical practicality. So one of his friends, it might have been Mike, I don't know who it was, but one of his friends was doing a dissertation and was curious about core temperatures during marathons, right? What's going on with that? What's the physiology of that? So John and this guy in the Santa Barbara Marathon did a thing where at every aid station, roughly every 5K, they would stop, use an anal thermometer, run for 50 feet, take it out, do a reading, write it down, and go on to the next one. And they did this for the entire marathon. And I just think it's awesome because I can picture John saying, oh yeah, well that really is an interesting question. Just being so practical about how to find out. And in fact, actually it was fairly awesome because it turned out that was the finding that led to discovering that human brains have a differential cooling system than the rest of the body. And nobody knew that before, and after that was discovered because of the data they got. So, but I thought that in terms of just sort of, okay, well, how do we find that out? And then the iceberg towing, actually John did this is just because no one's going to talk about the research he did. Some of it we can't talk about, but some of it we can. And so he did a study in the 80s on towing icebergs from Greenland to the Middle East for fresh water, because icebergs are fresh water, and so he did this study. Well, he found out you can't tow the icebergs, but I just really like the idea of, well, could we do that? We put a couple of guy lines and drag. The study was actually replicated recently, and John's result held up. You can't do that. but really, the thing for me is that very practical. John just met everybody as whoever they were, and as far as I could see, just more or less accepted people whoever they were. That may be different with his offspring, people close. But in my life, in my working life, he was just like, okay, you are yourself, so it's good. What are we going to do? And to me, it's hugely admirable in that. Okay, so I think, Karen, are you next?